Unit 8B test review. If I go too fast on anything, then pause it or rewind it or whatever you need to do, but I'm going to go pretty quick. Okay, so this first section says determine the GCF and factor the following polynomials. Okay, so we know that we should always find the GCF first anyways. Okay, so here we go. We're going to look for a GCF here. So what goes into both 12 and 3? Okay, well 3 goes into both of those. They also both have an x. So my GCF is 3x. But I need to take the GCF out and also write what's left. When I divide a 3x out from 12x squared, that leaves me with 4x. When I divide 3x out of 3xy, that just leaves me with y. Double check what you have left in your group. Double check that you don't have any GCFs left. If you still have something that they both have in common, then you didn't take the greatest common factor out. Number 2, okay, I'm going to look for a GCF. Okay, so I see that they both have 7 in common. That goes into 21 and 35. They also both have an A and they both have a B. So I can take 7AB out. If I take that out of the first term, that leaves me with 3. The A cancels out. I took one of the B's out, so I have 3B minus 35 divided by 7 is 5. I took one of the A squareds out, so I'm left with A. And then I took a B out, so the B's cancel. Okay, there's nothing left to factor in these last two problems. After I don't have any squareds left or anything, there's nothing left to factor. Number 3, I have to look at all 3 terms here. So they all have a 3 in common. They also all have an x and they have a y. So I'm going to take 3xy out. When I take that out of the first term, that leaves me with 5xy squared plus 12 divided by 3 is 4. I took an x out, that leaves me with x squared. I took that y out, so that cancels out. Plus 21 divided by 3 is 7. And I took the x out and I took the y out. Okay, notice I have multiple variables here. All these are asking for is you to take the GCF and factor what's left. So write what's left. Number 4. Okay, now these, I'm going to take a GCF out and I'm going to factor them. Okay, we're going to factor these by grouping. So number 4, there is no GCF. Notice there's also no equal sign here, so it's just asking us to factor. Okay, so after that, I'm going to multiply my A times C. So this means I need 2 factors that multiply to be 14 and add to be 15. Okay, so I told you I'm going to go quick. I'm going to go ahead and just give you those factors. They are 14 and 1, but you need to be able to figure out how to get those. Because there is a 1 in front of this, I can do the shortcut, and I am going to do that on this video. I'm going to do the shortcut if I can. So because it's 14, it's W plus 14, and because it's a positive 1, it's W plus 1. Those can go in any order. You can write W plus 1 and then W plus 14 if you want. Number 5, have m squared minus 12m plus 20. There is no GCF here, so I'm going to multiply A times C. A times C, I need 2 factors that multiply to be 20 and add to be negative 12. You have to be able to recognize here that this is going to have to be 2 negatives. If they're going to multiply to be positive but add to be negative, that means it's going to be 2 negatives. My 2 negative answers here are going to be negative 10 and negative 2. Okay, again, we got lucky because we have a 1 in front, so I can just use the shortcut. So because it's a negative 10, it's m minus 10, and because it's a negative 2, it's m minus 2. Number 6. Okay, there is no GCF, and unfortunately we won't be able to do the shortcut here because there's a 2 in front. Okay, so I'm going to go in to multiply my A times C. So I need 2 factors that multiply to be negative 6 and add to be 5. Okay, so our factors that we are going to use here are going to be a positive 6 and a negative 1. Okay, so I'm going to have to split up my middle term since I can't do the shortcut here. I'm going to break that into these 2 numbers that I chose. So a positive 6x and a minus x. You bring your first term down, the 2x squared, and you bring your last term down. Now the process that we use to factor is called grouping. So I'm going to group my first two terms together and group my last two terms together. Looking at my first group, what do we have in common? Okay, they both have a 2x. So I'm going to write what I took out, my GCF, which is 2x. If I take that out, that leaves me with x plus 3. I'm going to bring that minus sign down and look at my second group. My second group has a 1 in common, but look at what kind of 1 this is. This is actually a negative 1. Okay, so really I'm dividing out negative 1. That leaves me with x plus 3. Remember, your two groups need to end up being the same here. So if for some reason you've got x minus 3 in that second group, look back at your first group. So my final factors here are x plus 3, because that's what's in the group. And then I'm left with 2x minus 1. And again, these can go in either order. You could write 2x minus 1 and then x plus 3. Number 7, there is no GCF, so I'm going to go straight into multiply a times c. So I need two factors that multiply to be negative 21 and add to be negative 20. All right, my two factors here are negative 21 and positive 1. I can't do the shortcut, so I'm going to break my middle term apart into a minus 21x and a plus x. Bring your first term down and bring your last term down. Now the process we use is called grouping. So we're going to group. We're going to look at our first group and see what we have in common. We have a 3x in common. So I'm going to take a 3x out. If I take that out, that would leave me with x minus 7. Now look at your second group. My second group only has a 1 in common. I do like to pull that 1 out and write it down, or else I'm going to forget it in my factors. If I divide by 1, that leaves me with x minus 7. Notice our two groups are the same, so I'm going to write x minus 7 is one of my factors, and then I'm left with 3x plus 1. That's why it's nice to have that 1 there, so you can see that you need to write that down. All right, number 8. First, we need to see if there is a greatest common factor. Okay, well, just kind of looking at this, I can tell that 3 goes into everything, but they also all have a 0 at the end, so I bet 30 goes into everything. So I'm going to take a 30 out. That leaves me with 3x squared plus 7x plus 2. Okay, now I need to factor everything, the trinomial on the inside. So I'm going to do a times c. So I need two factors that multiply to be 6 and add to be 7. Okay, so I'm going to think about that. That would be 6 and 1. I cannot do the shortcut here. So I'm going to break this 7x apart into a positive 6x and a positive x. Bring my first term down and bring my last term down. I'm going to group my two terms here. Look at my first group. I have a 3x in common. So I'm going to take 3x out. That leaves me with x plus 2. Bring my plus sign down and look at my second group. I can bring out a 1. So again, I want to write that 1 down. If I divide by a positive 1, that still just leaves me with x plus 2. Okay, so my final answer here is x plus 2, 3x plus 1, and don't forget the 30 that you took out from the very beginning. That is also a factor. You actually have 3 factors here. That gets missed a lot. So when you take that out, if you need to go ahead and write it down in your answer so you don't forget it, then do that. All right, number 9. If the area of a rectangle is 4x squared minus 9, determine its dimensions in terms of x. Okay, I've heard a few people say that they're not sure what that means in terms of x. That just means you're going to have an x in your answer. Okay, you're not going to have just a number at the end. You're going to have an x there. Okay, so this is giving us the area, and we need to find the dimensions. Okay, well, think about what factoring is. Factoring is figuring out what multiplies together to get that term. So that's what we're trying to find, is what two dimensions were multiplied together to get 4x squared minus 9. All right, so first I'm going to look at 4x squared minus 9 and see if there's a GCF. And there's not. Now remember, after the GCF, if you see two terms, what's the question you're supposed to ask yourself? Is it a difference of squares? So let's check this. Is 4 a square? Yes. Is x squared a square? Yes. It's a difference. And 9 is a square. So the good news is we can do the shortcut here. Okay, what's the square root of 4? 2. What's the square root of x squared? X. Remember, one's going to be plus, one's going to be minus. And what's the square root of 9? 3. So those are our dimensions, 2x plus 3 and 2x minus 3. Number 10, determine the length and width of the rectangle in terms of x. Okay, so again, there it is. In terms of x, that means we're going to have x in our answer, which means we're looking for factors. And I know that's confusing because there is an equal sign here, okay, but we're just looking for factors. So I need to factor x squared, minus 5x minus 36. Okay, there is no GCF, so I'm going to do a times c. I need two factors that multiply to be negative 36 and add to be negative 5. My two factors we're going to use are going to be negative 5 or negative 9 and positive 4. Okay, good news is we have a 1 in front. Okay, so I can do the shortcut, which means negative 9 is x minus 9, positive 4 is x plus 4. And those are our two dimensions. All right, number 11, determine the binomial factors. Okay, that's what we've been finding on all of these is the binomial factors. Okay, but notice now we have 4 terms. Well, how do we factor something with 4 terms? We group. Okay, so I'm going to group the first 2 terms together and the last 2 terms together. Let's look at our first group. Our first group has a b in common. So I'm going to take a b out. That leaves me with b squared minus 3 plus, now I'm going to look at my second group. My second group has a 5 in common. So I'm going to bring that 5 out, and guess what we're left with? B squared minus 3. So my final factors here are b squared minus 3 and b plus 5. Now here's what you have to be careful of. Notice we still have this squared. You would still now need to look at this binomial and make sure that it's not a difference of squares. So looking at b squared minus 3, is that a difference of squares? Well, b squared is a perfect square. It is a difference, but 3 is not a perfect square, so this is your final answer. All right, now looking at b, I have 4 terms again, so I'm going to go straight into grouping. If you don't have a GCF in all of it, and we don't. Okay, so I'm going to look at my first group. My first group, they have a 3 in common, and they have x squared in common. So I'm going to take 3x squared out. If I divide that out, that leaves me with 2x minus 3y. Okay, now I'm going to look at my second group. My second group has a 5 and a y in common. If I factor that out, that leaves me with 2x minus 3y. Notice our groups are the same. So my answer here is 2x minus 3y and 3x squared plus 5y. All right, this says in questions 12 through 15, factor the following polynomials completely. Okay, so we're going to keep doing as much as we can on these problems. All right, so on number 12, okay, I'm going to look at this and see if there's a GCF. Okay, well, there's not a GCF. Now, there is a shortcut to this one because there is a 1 in front. But if you do not want to do the shortcut, I'm going to show you how to do this the long way because it is kind of hard to remember the shortcut sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to do A times C. So I need 2 factors that multiply to be 900 and add to be 60. Okay, so 2 numbers that multiply to be 900 and add to be 60 are 30 and 30. Okay, so yes, there is a shortcut here, but I'm going to go ahead and just do this the long way. Okay, so this 60xy, I'm going to break that down. into a positive 30xy and a positive 30xy. So these are just a little bit different because you have more than one letter in your term. Here we have xy. I'm going to bring my first term down and bring my last term down. And really, if you just do it this way, you'll always get it right. So you might as well, I don't know, do it the long way. All right, now I'm going to group. So if I look at my first group, they have an x in common. If I take an x out, that leaves me with x plus 30y. Bring the plus sign down. I'm going to take out a 30 and a y here. If I take that out, that leaves me with x plus 30y. So my answer here is x plus 30y. And since both of these are the same, I'm just going to say squared. Or you can say x plus 30y and x plus 30y. But since they're the same, that's probably what you'll see on the answer key. Number 13. Okay, first I need to see if there's a GCF, and there is. So I'm going to take a 2 out of everything first. If I take a 2 out, that leaves me with x squared plus 6xy plus 9y squared. So this is another instance where, yes, there is a shortcut, but honestly, I would just do it the longer way. Okay, so I'm going to do a times c. I need two factors that multiply to be 9 and add to be 6. So 3 and 3. So I'm going to break this middle term apart into a positive 3xy and a positive 3xy. Bring your first term down, bring your last term down. And now I'm going to group. So group your first two terms together and group your last two terms together. My first group, I can take out an x. I'm going to take that x out. I'm left with x plus 3y. My second group, I can take out a 3 and a y. And if I take that out, I'm left with x plus 3y. So my final answer here is x plus 3y. And since they're the same, I'm just going to say that that's squared. All right, number 14, I'm looking for a GCF first. My GCF is 2. If I factor that 2 out, I'm left with x squared minus 9. Okay, now I'm not done because look, I have a binomial left. And remember the question you ask yourself if you have a binomial is it a difference of squares? Okay, well it is because x is squared and 9 is a perfect square and it's a difference. So I can break that into x plus 3 and x minus 3. And then I'm done. All right, number 15. Okay, so I'm looking for a GCF here. I believe 13 goes into all these numbers, and they all have an a squared in common, and they all have a b in common. So I'm going to take that out, 13a squared b, and I'm going to write what's left. So that would leave me with 3b squared plus 78 divided by 13 is 6. And I'll be left with an a, and that b's canceled out, minus, I took 13 divided by 13 is just 1. I took 2 of the 4 a's out, so I'm left with a squared, and then I'll be left with b to the 6th. Now I know, because on all of these there's still always more work to do, there is nothing left to do here. You do not know how to factor this, so when it looks crazy like this, just assume I can't go any further. Number 16, name all the terms synonymous to the term solution when solving a quadratic equation. Okay, so remember solution also means x-intercepts. Make sure you don't say y-intercepts, make sure you know they are x-intercepts. They're also called roots, and they're also called zeros. You do need to know those for the test. Number 17, what is the first step in finding the solutions to the following quadratic equation? Okay, now this, and you're going to see this on the next problem, but because this is already equal to 0, this has already been factored. So don't try to FOIL this and then factor it again. You're going to get it right back to what it's at right now. Okay, so I do not need to double distribute. Okay, I don't need to FOIL. That would be doing the same work we've already done. Okay, Let's go down to C. Divide by 3. No, that is one of our factors. It's like this has already been factored for you. You just need to find the solutions. And then add 3 to both sides. No. What you need to do, this has already been factored, so now you would set each factor equal to 0. Which now means we'll be able to do number 18. So for questions 18 through 22, solve the equations. Solve them. Don't factor, solve. But we will need to factor first. And I added this in. Number 18 is already factored. That's like the one we just looked at. This question does get missed a lot on the test because y'all try to do too much work. This has already been factored for you. So when it says determine the solutions and it's already equal to 0, all you have to do is set each one of these equal to 0. Now technically I have 3 factors here. I have 3, I have h plus 6, and I have 2h minus 7. Okay, so that first factor, 3. 3 equals 0. Well, that doesn't even make sense. So that's not going to be a solution. Okay, I have h plus 6 equals 0. If I solve for h, I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. So h is equal to negative 6. So there's one solution. Now I also have 2h minus 7 equals 0. If I add 7 to both sides, I have 2h equals 7. And if I divide by 2, I have h is 7 over 2. So I have 2 solutions here. Most of these you will have 2 solutions. Alright, number 19. Now notice this says determine the zeros. Right? We're going to solve this the exact same way we're solving all these other ones. Okay? The zeros mean solutions. Okay, so first I can take a 2 out of everything. If I take a 2 out of everything, that leaves me with g squared minus 7g plus 10 equal to 0. Okay, so now I do a times c. So I need 2 factors that multiply to be 10 and add to be negative 7. My 2 factors are negative 5 and negative 2. Okay, so I'm going to factor, keep that 2 out. But because I have a 1 in front, I can go ahead and write my factors. My factors will be g minus 5 and g minus 2. Now this is all still equal to 0. Remember, we're trying to find solutions, not just factors. Okay, well, so I'm going to set 2 equal to 0. Well, that doesn't even make sense. If I set g minus 5 equal to 0 and I add 5 to both sides, g is 5. If I take g minus 2 and set it equal to 0 and I add 2 to both sides, g is 2. So those are my 2 solutions, 5 and 2. Number 20, okay, remember we cannot factor until it's equal to 0. So I need to subtract this 3 before I do anything. Just moving it to the other side. So I have 6g squared plus 7g minus 3 equal to 0, and now I can factor this. Okay, let's look to see if we have a GCF. We don't. So I'm going to multiply a times c. 2 factors that multiply to be negative 18 and add to be 7. So my 2 factors here are going to be 9 and negative 2. Okay, we cannot do the shortcut because we have a 6 in front. So I have to break this 7g down into a positive 9g and a minus 2g. Bring your first term down, bring your last term down. And now we group. So this first group, I have a 3g in common. So I take out a 3g. That leaves me with 2g plus 3. Bring your minus sign down. I can take out a negative 1. And that leaves me with 2g plus 3. Okay, so I'm kind of running out of room. So I'm going to come over to this other problem and finish this. So my 2 factors are 2g plus 3 and 3g minus 1 equal to 0. But I still need to find the solutions. So I'm going to have 2g plus 3 equals 0 and 3g minus 1 equals 0. So I'll subtract 3. So I have 2g equals negative 3. Divide by 2. G is negative 3 over 2. Over here I'm going to add 1. I have 3g equals 1, divide by 3, g is 1/3. So those are my two solutions here. All right, 21. Okay, so I'm going to erase this. Well, I think I have room. Never mind. I'll leave that there. All right, 5x squared equals 245. Remember, you cannot factor until it's all on one side. So I'm going to subtract 245 and move it over. So I have 5x squared minus 245 equal to 0. Okay, so we're going to look for a GCF, and we have one. 5 goes into both of those. So I'm going to take a 5 out, and that leaves me with x squared minus 49 equal to 0. Now, we got lucky because x squared minus 49 is a difference of squares. So that's going to break down into x plus 7 and x minus 7 equal to 0, which makes it easy for when we set these equal to 0, because that means I'm going to have x of 7 and negative 7. And those are my two solutions. All right, number 22. Greta Green Thumb is planting a small vegetable garden which will have an area of 80 square feet. Its length is 2 feet more than its width. Find the dimensions of the garden. Okay, so I'm going to draw a picture of this. We have this garden. Okay, and it says the area is 80 square feet. Okay, so we have to think about the formula for area of a rectangle. So area is length times width. Okay, so what two things do we need here? We need length, we need width. Okay, so let's see what it says about length. It says the length is 2 feet more than the width. So 2 more than the width. I'm going to say that width is W. So 2 feet more than that would be W plus 2. But I can't just have length, I need to have width. And what is width in this situation? It's just W. Alright, so now I'm going to plug everything that I know into this equation. So my area is 80. My length is W plus 2. And my width is W. And I'm going to switch those around just to make it look nicer. So W and W plus 2. Okay, now before you move your 80 over to get this equal to 0, you have to work everything out on the right side first. Okay, so this W, I need to distribute that before I move the 80 over. So if I distribute W, W times W is W squared, W times 2 is 2W, and I still have that equal to 80. Now before we can factor this, we have to get it equal to 0. Okay, so I'm going to subtract this 80. And I'm just going to throw it down there at the end so I don't have to rewrite it all. And now it's equal to 0. Alright, so now we look for a GCF. There is no GCF. So I'll do A times C. We need two factors that multiply to be negative 80 and add to be 2. My factors here are going to be 10 and negative 8. The good news here is that there is a 1 in front, so we can do the shortcut. So my factors are W plus 10 and W minus 8 equal to 0, but I don't want factors here. I want the dimensions. I want the solutions. So I'm going to set W plus 10 equal to 0 and W minus 8 equal to 0. If I subtract 10, W is negative 10. And if I add 8, W is 8. Now you have to think about this a little bit because we're talking about dimensions. And right now this is giving me two dimensions for, or two numbers for width. It's saying width could be negative 10 or width could be 8. Okay, well we all know that dimensions cannot be negative. So negative 10 doesn't work. So our width is 8. So width is 8. And then how would we get length? Look back at the length. We said length is width plus 2, which means it's 8 plus 2, which means it's 10. And remember, you can always check these too. You can check, you got your sides as 10 and 8. We'll multiply those and make sure that it equals 80. 23. Determine the dimensions of the triangle that has an area of 30 square meters. Include units, hit multiply the equation by 2 before factoring. All right, so here we go. We need to first know the formula for area of a triangle. Okay, so we have 1/2 base times height, that's equal to our area. Okay, and if you see here, we see that our base is x and our height is x plus 17. So I really have everything I need for this problem. So I have 1/2, my base is x, my height is x plus 17, and that's equal to our area, which is 30. This is a problem that gets missed a lot on the test. Okay, now I don't like fractions any more than y'all do, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this fraction, and to get rid of a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2 to get rid of that. That's just getting rid of that 1/2. You do not have to distribute that anywhere. Okay, we're just multiplying the 1/2 times 2 and moving it to the other side. Okay, so now on the other side I have 60. Okay, I'm also at the same time going to distribute this x, because we have to get everything worked out before we get it equal to 0. So x times x is x squared, and x times 17 is 17x. All right, so now I can get this ready. I've got to subtract the 60 and get it equal to 0 first. So I have x squared plus 17x minus 60 equal to 0. So I see if there's a GCF. There is not a GCF. So I'm going to multiply my a times c. So I need two factors that multiply to be negative 60 and add to be 17. And my factors are going to be 20 and negative 3. Okay, now I can do the shortcut here because I have a 1 in front. So I have x plus 20 and x minus 3. If I set x plus 20 equal to 0, I'm going to get negative 20. If I set x minus 3 equal to 0, I'm going to get 3. Which one of these answers do we want? We want the positive answer, okay, because you can't have negative measurements. Now, if this was not a word problem, you would still have both answers. They would both be solutions. Okay, so up here, my equation, okay, I don't know what it exactly says for equation. I'm just going to say what it was after we got it all moved to the same side, which was x squared plus 17x minus 60 equal to 0. You could put your original equation there if you want. We found our base because our base was x, and we just found that that was 3. And our height is 3 plus 17, which means our height is 20. And remember, you can check these. Do base times height, so 3 times 20 times a half. So 3 times 20 is 60, times a half is 30. 24. Determine the dimensions, both length and width of the rectangle if its area is 132 square inches. All right, so this is talking about area of our rectangle. So area is length times width, which means I have to multiply these two sides. So I have w plus 4 times 2w minus 5. And that's equal to our area, which is 132. Okay, this is a really fun problem because remember, you have to get everything worked out on that one side before you move the 132 over. Well, how do we multiply a binomial times a binomial? We have to FOIL it. Okay, so I'm going to do w times 2w. That's 2w squared. W times negative 5 is minus 5w. The inside, 4 times 2w is 8w. And 4 times negative 5 is negative 20. Okay, so now I'm going to combine these things. So I've got 2w squared. Negative 5w plus 8w is a positive 3w. And if y'all are okay with this, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 132 from both sides right now, so I don't have to worry about it again. And so that gets me minus 152. Okay, so now I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to see if I have a GCF, and I don't, which is really bad news because we're going to have some big numbers here. Okay, so I'm going to do A times C. So 2 times a negative 152. So I need two factors that multiply to be a negative 304 and add to be 3. So multiply to be negative 3. This is one I'm going to even have to put in my calculator because I don't know all the factors of negative 304. And I don't have all day to figure them out. So I put that in my calculator and I got 19 and negative 16. Unfortunately, we cannot do the shortcut here. So we have to break this 3w apart into a positive 19w and a minus 16w. Bring your first term down, bring your last term down. Okay, now we have 4 terms, so we group. My first group, the only thing they have in common is a w. So I'm going to take a w out. That leaves me with 2w plus 19. My second group, this is going to take a little bit of trial and error, but I believe they both have an 8 in common. And here's how I know that. I know in my group I need to end up with 2w plus 19. So I've just kind of started there. So 8 goes into both of those, and that leaves me with 2w. And 152 divided by 8 is 19. Now notice we're really taking out a negative 8 here. All right, so we are going to end up with plus 19. All still equal to 0. So my factors here, I'm going to come over here and write my factors. I have w minus 8. I'm going to go ahead and just set that equal to 0. And I have 2w plus 19 equal to 0. So if I add 8 to both sides, I get w equals 8. Now over here, if I subtract 19, that's going to get me a negative number. Okay, and remember we're talking about dimensions here, so I'm just not even going to finish working through that. Again, if this was not a word problem talking about dimensions, you would still use that answer. But here, the only one I really need is 8. Okay, so it wants to know the length and the width. Okay, well w we found was 8. So this side is 8 plus 4, which means that side is 12. This side is 2 times 8, minus 5. So 16 minus 5 is 11. So our two sides are 12 and 11. Because what is 12 times 11? 12 times 11 is 132. A lot of work for one problem, but you're not always going to have to do that long way. We just had to on this one. 25. A number subtracted from its square is 110. Compute both possible answers. Okay, so we have a number. I'm going to say that's x. Subtracted from. Now these are that's going to end up having to go after that because it's being subtracted from its square. Well, its square would be x squared is 110. So I have x squared. X needs to be subtracted from that. So it's going to be minus x equals 110. Now I need to get this equal to 0 before I factor it. So I'm going to subtract 110 and move it to the other side. So we have x squared minus x minus 110 equal to 0. All right, no GCF, so I'm going to multiply a times c. Two factors that multiply to be a negative 110 and add to be negative 1. These are negative 11 and 10. Okay, and it wants us to compute the answer, so it wants the solutions here. So I'll have x minus 11 and x plus 10 equal to 0. If I set x minus 11 equal to 0, and I add 11 to both sides, x is 11. If I set x plus 10 equal to 0, and I subtract 10 from both sides, x is negative 10. Notice here we are not talking about measurements, so we can have both of these answers. So x is 11 and negative 10 here. 26. Which is always a correct conclusion about the quantities in this function? y equals negative x plus 3, and it says hint, put the equation y equals and use the table. Definitely do that because this is really hard to see from the graph. It's a lot easier to see in the table. Okay, and I don't have my calculator pulled up one here, but you would type this in your y equals, pull up your table, and see which one of these answers is true. So the variable x is always 3 more than y. Okay, I'm looking at my table in my calculator, and that is definitely not true. When the value of y is negative, the value of y is also negative. I'm looking at my table, and when y is negative, x is actually positive, so that's not right. When the value of x is negative, the value of y is positive. Well, that looks true. So let me check D. As the value of x increases, so as my x is getting bigger, the value of y also increases. Nope, if you look in the table, it's actually decreasing. So my answer here is C. The graph below shows a relationship between the hours worked and a carpenter's earnings. Based on the data, which best represents the amount of money the carpenter would earn from a job that took 5 days to complete? Hint, draw a line of best fit and estimate. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to draw a line of best fit. That's the line that best fits this data. Okay, so this is probably something that it would look like. All right, now I'm going to go to 5 and see about where that would be. It looks like it would be about at 1250. So there we go. There's our answer, 1250. Okay, number 28. Multiply and simplify. All right. Move this down a little bit. Okay, so here we go. I need to take this 5c squared and distribute that. So I have 5c to the third plus 50c squared. Now I'm going to distribute this negative 4c. So that gets me minus 8c cubed plus 24c squared minus 4c. Now, after you distribute those, you are done multiplying. We're no more multiplying. Okay, so now we're just going to look for like terms. So I have a 5c cubed and a negative 8c cubed. That gets me negative 3c cubed. I have a 50c squared and a positive 24c squared. So that's 74c squared. And I have a minus 4c. That's my answer. 29. If 9x plus 12 equals 6a, then 3x plus 4 equals what? So compare these two things and see what's happening. If you notice, the 9 has been divided by 3, the 12 has been divided by 3 to get these two things. Okay? Which means it's going to be equal to 6a divided by 3, which is 2a. You should have to be able to recognize that pattern. Number 30, what would happen to a graph if the slope changed from 2 to 3? Now, if you don't know the answers to these questions off the top of your head, type an equation in your calculator. Type it in your y equals and graph these. Change the slope from 2 to 3 and see what happens. So make up 2x plus 1, or 2x in this case, 2x plus 3 from part B, and then change it to 3 and see what's happening. You're going to see that the line is going to get steeper. When the slope gets bigger, that line gets pulled tighter, and so it gets steeper. Part B, the y-intercept changed from 3 to negative 1. All that's going to do to a line is you're going to have a line. Okay, it does not say in part B that the slope is changing. It just says that it's moving down. So all that means is that that line is being shifted down. So it's shifted down. And how many units is it being shifted down? It's going from 3 to negative 1, so it's shifting down 4. But again, you can see that from your calculator if you'll just make up an equation. In part C, the slope was multiplied by negative 1. That means it's going to be reflected. Okay, basically if it was positive, now it's negative. Or if it was negative, now it's positive. You probably don't need to have all that written down, but that's what that means. 31, Lady Gaga went on a shopping spree. Her shopping bag was shaped like a rectangular prism with dimensions of x, x plus 2, and 2x plus 1. Write an equation for the volume of the bag, then find B of 5 and B of 19 over 2. Okay, a lot of y'all missed this on the last test because you're not multiplying properly. Okay, so volume, length times width times height. Okay, so our volume here is going to be x times x plus 2 times 2x plus 1. Okay, now these are three different things that are being multiplied together. I do not need to take the x and distribute it to the x plus 2 and the 2x plus 1. It's not on the 2x plus 1. It's only on the x plus 2. Okay, so there's a couple different ways you could do this. You could go ahead and distribute that x into the first group, or if you wanted to FOIL first, you could FOIL first. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and distribute that x. So that gets me x squared plus 2x. And I still have 2x plus 1. Now this second group, or now what I have, I'm going to have to FOIL this. So I have x squared times 2x. That gives me 2x cubed. X squared times 1 is x squared. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. And 2x times 1 is 2x. I'm going to simplify this. I've got 2x cubed. Now notice we are not trying to factor this. Okay, we are multiplying this. We're just FOILing. Okay, so don't get this confused. Don't try to now factor this because you're going to get it right back to where we had it. So I have 2x cubed plus 5x squared plus 2x. All right, this is my volume. So when it asks for my volume, that's what it's asking for. Okay, but then it says find B of 5. All that is going to need to do is to plug 5 in for x. So I'm going to have 2 times 5 cubed plus 5 times 5 squared plus 2 times 5. And I would not even try to simplify little pieces of this at a time. I would just type all of this in your calculator, exactly like it looks. Just make sure that when you're plugging numbers in, that you plug them in parentheses. When you plug all those in, you get 385. Okay, now I'm going to do B of 19 over 2. Now 19 over 2 is actually 9.5, and that's probably a little bit easier to plug in, so I'm going to plug that in instead. So I'm going to have 2 times 9.5 cubed plus 5 times 9.5 squared plus 2 times 9.5, and I'm going to plug that whole thing into my calculator because it can do the work for me. So my answer here is 2,185. But this type of problem is not going to go away, so you have to make sure you know how to multiply those things, and you need to know how to plug numbers in. 32. A plant is 1 inch tall and grows at a rate of 3 inches per week. Which graph represents this function? Okay, so we need to find one that has a y-intercept of 1. Okay, so A, that has a y-intercept of 1 because that's where this plant is starting. B has a y-intercept of 3. That's not it. It's trying to trick us. C has a y-intercept of 3. That's not it. And D has a y-intercept of 1. Okay, so it could be A or B. Now we need to look at which one is growing at 3 inches per week. Well, if I pick 2 pretty points on this first graph, I'm going up 1 over 3. So my slope is 1/3. If I look at answer choice D and I pick 2 pretty points, I'm going up 1, 2, 3, and over 1. So that's the one that has a slope of 3. So D is my answer. 33. Graph the function with the given domain. Identify the range of the function and state whether the graph is discrete or continuous. Okay, so really this is wanting me to plug in -4, -2, 0, and 2 for x, because that's what domain means. And I'm going to cheat doing this. I'm going to type this in my y equals. So I'm going to go to my y equals and type this in. And then I'm going to pull up my table. And I'm going to let my table plug these points in for me. So if I do that, when x is -4, y is -1. When x is -2, y is 0. When x is 0, y is 1. And when x is 2, y is 2. So that's my range. And so it's just wanting me to graph these 4 points. It's not wanting me to graph the entire line. It just wants that domain in that range. So I have -4, -1, -2, 0, 0, 1, and 2, 2. Nope, I just put that in the wrong spot. 2, 2. There we go. So you can see what our line would look like, but it doesn't want the whole line. It just wants those specific points, which means this is discrete. If it was continuous, it would want everything, and it doesn't. It just wants those specific points. 34. During a Carroll Dragon football game, the parents of the football players sold hot dogs and popcorn to raise money for new uniforms. They charged $2.50 for a bag of popcorn and $2 for a hot dog. The parents collected $336 in sales during the game. They sold twice as many bags of popcorn as hot dogs. How many bags of popcorn and hot dogs did they sell? It says hint, write a let statement, and a system of equations to solve. All right, so here we go. I'm going to let P be popcorn and H be hot dogs. All right, so let's see if it gives us a total of any kind. They do say they collected $336 in sales. Okay, so they're charging $2.50 for a bag of popcorn, so 2.5p, plus $2 for a hot dog, so 2h, and they sold $336 worth. Now my next equation comes from this sentence where it starts with they. They sold twice as many bags of popcorn as hot dogs. Now these sentences are a little tricky, so what I say is, what do you see first in that sentence? Do you see popcorn or hot dogs? Okay, well I see popcorn comes before hot dogs. So it's going to be P equals, whatever you see first in that sentence, those tricky sentences, it's that equals. Okay, so they sold twice as many bags of popcorn as hot dogs, so P is equal to 2H. Now this problem is nice because all I have to do is take what P is equal to, and I'm going to substitute that in for P. This is the substitution method. So I have 2.5 times 2H, because I'm substituting that in, plus 2H equals 336. 2.5 times 2H is 5H, plus 2H equals 336. 5H plus 2H is 7H, equals 336. And 336 divided by 7 is 48. So that's how many hot dogs we sold. Now we need to figure out how many popcorns we sold. And the easiest equation to get that from is that second equation that we wrote. So P is equal to 2 times hot dogs. So P is equal to 2 times 48, which would be 96. You have to know how to write these systems problems, these equations, and you need to still remember how to solve them. 35. When Glamorous Glenda had her picture taken, PhotoPhil charged a $10 sitting fee and $6 for each sheet of pictures purchased. If the total cost is a function of the number of pictures purchased, write an equation. All right, so I'm going to say that my cost, so let's just say C, is equal to, okay, it's $6 for each. Remember when you see that word each, you're supposed to put an X after it. So 6 each, so 6X, and it also got charged $10 sitting fee. Determine what the graph's slope and y-intercept represents. So the slope here, what is our slope? Our slope is 6. What does that represent? That's the price per sheet. Slope is always what's happening each time, or per. Your y-intercept, that's always the start. If you can remember that your y-intercept is the starting point, you'll always get those answers right. Y-intercept is the start. So the start here is 10 because that's the sitting fee. That's what they had to pay at the very beginning. 36, determine the product. All right, we've already done a little bit of this, but we do need to FOIL this. So I have 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times negative 2 is minus 4x. 3 times x is 3x. And 3 times negative 2 is minus 6. I just need to simplify this, so I get 2x squared. Negative 4x plus 3x is minus x, minus 6. And that's my answer. 37, x times x is x squared. X times negative 7 is minus 7x. The inside is 5x. And 5 times negative 7 is negative 35. If I combine these, I get x squared minus 2x minus 35. And a problem that a lot of y'all missed on the last test, even though we tell y'all you cannot do this, you cannot take that little 2 and distribute that inside. You have to expand this into 2x minus 5 times 2x minus 5. I promise there's not a shortcut here. Okay, well there is, but we didn't teach it to you. Okay, so you have to expand this and then you need to FOIL. So 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times negative 5 is minus 10x. The inside is minus 10x. And the last negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. So that gives me 4x squared. Negative 10 minus 10 is minus 20x. And plus 25. We put these back on here to make sure you aren't getting these confused with factoring. Okay, I wouldn't then want to take that answer and factor it. That would get me right back to the beginning. 39, you put $350 in a savings plan that earns 3% annual interest compounded once a year. If you do not make any more deposits or withdrawals using the equation y equals a times 1 plus or minus r to the t power, how much will you have in the account after 4 years? All right, so it's giving us the equation. So I have y equals a, that's how much we're starting with, which is 350. 1, this is gaining money, so plus r, which is going to be 0.03 to the t power, which our time is 4. So I'm going to type that whole thing in my calculator. And that gets me about $393.93 if I round. 40, write the equation of the line with slope-intercept form. Okay, so I'm going to look here. I can see my y-intercept. My b is negative 1. My slope, if I pick 2 pretty points, my slope is up 1 over 1. Okay, but this is going downhill, so my slope is negative 1. So this is easy. My equation here is y equals negative x minus 1. And last one, determine the solutions by graphing y is greater than 2x plus 4. Okay, so I'm going to start at 4. I'm going to go up 2 over 1, or down 2 over 1. Okay, I'm going to stop there. This is going to be a dashed line. And I need everything greater than that, which means I need everything above this line, which is everything up here. All right, if you just watched this entire video and you just copied everything down, make sure you go back and do this again by yourself, or at least go back and do some of the problems that you think you're going to struggle with. Because it is not going to help you just to watch me do everything for you. Thanks.